好的，那我们相信大家现在非常的期待喽。那我们现在呢就会请 Dan Stevenson 微软亚洲 Teams 的工程总监，然后上台跟大家分享我们全球的应用案例，还有跟大家介绍整个平台待会要怎么使用。我们掌声欢迎。
OK， 大家好。都长好。Okay, it's a joke. 我叫 Dan Stevenson. 我可以说一点点中文。我4年前在西雅图加入的一个 Microsoft 的 startup 叫 SkypeX。我们要发明the future of collaboration, the future of applications. 然后我们2年前shipped 的一个 V1 的 Microsoft Teams， 然后我的家人我们去年搬来台北，然后我现在是Microsoft Teams 的 Asia Engineering Director， and so 我现在说英文好。My team across Asia helps customers adopt and deploy Microsoft Teams. Our job is to get people using Teams, get developers building apps on Teams. Ever since I moved with my family to Taiwan last fall, I have been trying to figure out the best way for us, for Microsoft Teams, to contribute to Taiwan, which is such an important part of my life. And I was talking to one of our judges, who's coming later, and to Tiffany, who was just talking, and we had the idea about 2 months ago to do a hackathon. Now, we have done hackathons before. We do them inside of companies. We go to a big company like DBS Bank, and we bring in a few hundred developers in their IT department, and they work on building some projects inside the bank. We've never done a public hackathon open to developers from many different companies, from schools, from government agencies, like this one. So it was a really good idea to do this, I think. I'm very excited that we can do this first in the world here in Taiwan. Today, I'm going to take a few minutes, and I want to tell you about where Microsoft Teams is. I want to talk to you about building applications on Microsoft Teams. I will show you some resources to get started. You already got some of that in email, but I just want to go over it again. And then I will show you in 5 minutes how to build 5 minutes each, how to build 3 different applications in Teams to get you thinking. And then I have 50 ideas for applications. Yesterday, when we sent it out in email, I think we had 37. The list has gotten longer. So now we have 50 great ideas, plus all the ideas you've brought in with you. So Microsoft Teams is being used by 500,000 companies, schools, government agencies around the world. In Asia, we have 135,000 of those companies and schools and government agencies. 10,000 or more employees are using Teams at 15 companies. And you are here at the very first public hackathon, which we're holding here in Taiwan. So when we started building Teams, and I was one of the founding engineers, we were thinking, okay, we need to do something to compete with Slack. Everybody knows Slack, right? And then those of us who had some exposure to Line and WeChat and Viber, we said, okay, we need to do something that has really good mobile messaging. And then we said, you know, Skype for Business, not really good in the cloud, so we need to replace Skype for Business. So we knew all that. The key thing, I think the most important differentiator for Microsoft Teams when we conceived it, and that has stayed with us throughout, is that we designed Microsoft Teams to be an operating system, an OS for business and collaboration applications. I remember when my vice president at Microsoft, who runs all of Microsoft Teams, and a few other things, when he said, oh yeah, it's an operating system. I was like, what? It's chat. And then I realized quickly, from my own job, that in fact, what do you do with chat? You chat about things. You chat about files. You make a call about a project. Something happens and you need to talk to people about it. All of those signals, all of that data, all of those documents are coming from applications. Where do applications live? Okay, I've been at Microsoft 16 years. I spent the first 3-4 years on Windows, so I know that applications live in operating systems. And so it was very natural at that point to realize Microsoft Teams is an operating system. Okay, number 2, what is the most important thing for an operating system? Well, take out your phone, put it in selfie mode, because it's you, it's the developers. Any operating system, in order to succeed, it needs apps. Apps in the store, apps in your private company store, apps that you run from your PC, apps for development, apps for marketing, apps for manufacturing or retail or finance or healthcare. Apps are what make operating systems go, and developers are the people who make apps. So we knew that we needed to have a very good incentive and a good capability for developers. And so I want to talk a little bit about, the title here says, why build apps on Microsoft Teams. I want to talk a little bit about why I would like you to build apps on Teams and why we think this is valuable for you. First, it's a rich application platform. It has so many different, I call them micro UI surfaces, and you have a handout that has a diagram of some of that. So you can make some very rich and collaborative applications. Second, it's fast and easy. I'll show you how easy. I have trained several people at Microsoft who are not developers to build apps in Microsoft Teams. It's not hard. You can do very complex, sophisticated apps, but you can start simple. You have the power of Microsoft 365, the power of Azure Cognitive Services for AI, and our IoT platform, and our bot framework, and the Graph API. You have all of these capabilities right there in front of you. And if you look at that diagram, you see there's a services layer and an integration layer. A lot of those are capabilities that we provide in Office 365 or in Microsoft 365 to help you out. Communications is the soul of Microsoft Teams, and it's built in to the application experience. Your apps that you are building today can chat, can make calls, join meetings. People can talk to your app, and they can talk with their colleagues about whatever it is your app is sharing with them. Maybe there's a problem on the production line, and it triggers an alert, and a page shows up with a picture of the problem and the temperature and the pressure and the other data from the production line. And automatically, that message is sent by the app to the 5 people who are on shift for that production line. And they can talk and chat, maybe join a call, and resolve that issue because the app went to the users because communications was built in. And then lastly, we have a pretty large audience, 500,000 companies. Office 365 overall has 155 million users. There are free versions of Microsoft Teams and trial versions. We have a guest access capability, so you can bring in partners and suppliers. So your apps can reach a massive audience and drive a lot of value to a lot of people. Okay, so probably 0.1% of you don't know what Microsoft Teams is, so I'm going to go very quickly just through an overview of Teams, but with an eye on application opportunities. So Teams is about chat, communications, calls and meetings. But when you think about chat, when this scrolls by, you see applications in the chat. That's what I was talking about earlier with having communications embedded in your application. You don't need to have your app side by side with email or side by side with chat. They're integrated together. Collaboration also can leverage artificial intelligence. We do face detection, and that API, the face detection API, is available for your apps in Azure. We do something funny where we swap out the background just for fun. You can do image manipulation in your app, and you can do that, again, through some of the Azure services. Second, collaboration. We have a lot of built-in collaboration tools already, like SharePoint for files, and PowerPoint, which you can edit, and Power BI, and Microsoft Planner, which is a Kanban board. But then you can also bring in your own application. This is Azure DevOps, which is a code development kind of productivity tool for developers. And you can see that they are sharing testing status or bugs in a chat conversation. Everything these apps do, your apps can do as well. Back 3 years ago, when we said Teams is an operating system, we told that to everybody else at Microsoft too. So when we went to them, or when they came to us to put their app in Teams, we said, great, we have a platform. Build your app on that platform. If the platform isn't good enough, we added capabilities, and then we shipped those so every application can benefit from that. I think probably more than half of the capabilities in our platform were inspired by other Microsoft applications asking for features for their app, and then we took that and we made it available to everybody. And not just on desktop or web, mobile is critical. Mobile apps on Android and iOS are essential to the utility, to the value of Microsoft Teams. All of the application experiences you build will work on mobile and desktop and web the same, iangda. There's no functional, fundamental difference between them. Of course, there are style differences, UI layout differences that you would expect, but we are deliberately making mobile and desktop peers. You can see we've also looked at, when we're building applications in Teams, going into different industries and verticals. You can only do this with an operating system. You can't create every single feature for every single user in every company in every industry in one application. You have to have a platform and extensibility. That's why I'm hoping that many of you are going to build the next great add-on to Teams for manufacturing or financial services, retail, healthcare, wherever it is. These are some apps that we built for healthcare and retail, a patient management app and a shift worker management and task assignment app. We will build some basic capabilities in Teams, but you know the standard Microsoft model. We go to a certain point, and then we build some really great APIs, and we use and leverage and partner with our ecosystem to build the rest of the capabilities for customers. Of course, Teams is based on Office 365, Microsoft 365, so very compliant. It's also important as app developers that you think about security and compliance. Today, probably don't worry too much about that. Today we're hacking. When we hack, we can cut some corners, that's okay. When you ship your actual product, of course, your customers, your internal IT staff, yourselves, companies who are using your app, they will have a pretty high expectation around security. And then the real reason we're here is because Teams was built as an operating system with extensibility at the core. These are just a few of the different ways that you can extend Teams, using tabs, which are full screen UI, or conversational bots, or cards, which are these little micro UIs that let you interact with an app, alert notifications, of course, a personal app view, so you can have essentially a full screen personal view of your app, and then capabilities like the Microsoft Graph API. There are currently 250, actually more than 250 apps in our store. Your app can go there. My team owns the store submission and approval process, or one of my peer teams. They're in Bangalore in India. I have an agreement with them that we will do everything we can to fast track the submissions from this group. We have a review process to make sure that the apps are up to a certain level. And once you pass that, your app can get in the store. It doesn't have to be. We also support a private store. Every company has their own private app store. And you can distribute your app through our partner catalog or through your website and provide that to companies to deploy in their private store. It's pretty much the same in terms of the end user experience. So your app can go here, or you can see there's a private company store right here where my mouse is. And that's just the apps that were uploaded for this company. So I wanted to show you a few examples before we jump into the developer platform and some richer details about building apps. This is an order exception process for manufacturing. And what you're seeing here is in the conversation group, in the channel, this app is surfacing a daily update on exceptions that need attention. And it's this nice little micro UI, and I can click on that and bring up a richer UI with buttons to chat or mark it complete, all within the app. Another example, this morning, one of my employees in Sydney, Australia, he reminded me that I needed to approve an expense report. I'm pretty slow, unfortunately, about approving expense reports. But I do that in Teams now. It's a lot easier. I just click to our approvals app, and I can approve my expense reports right there. This is an example for financial services, an expertise finder. So you can imagine a big bank, a big insurance company. They have some employees with very specialized knowledge about very technical financial topics that we don't understand. If you're working with a customer and you need to get access to one of these experts, having an expertise finder to find knowledge or people or documents is super helpful. Here, they're asking about financials, which is kind of a generic term, but you can get the idea. And it lists some experts, as well as providing access to this knowledge base. These are just pictures. These are examples of apps. You can build all these. These are all right in front of you, ready to build. This is in a hospital where we're managing the bed occupancy in the hospital. And if there are too many patients, they have to manage the facility. And so you can see in the channel, there was an alert coming in from the bot saying that it's over capacity. And they click on the button, and we have a little pop-up capability, and they can view that and update it and send it back. All in Teams all with the rest of their people there with them, because communications is at the center. Nobody had to leave this application. And then here's an example from education where we have a frequently asked questions, FAQ bot. And you can see that somebody is asking the question bot about how to do something. The question bot responds with an answer, and you can rate the answer. So the bot will learn from that. There's some nice Azure cognitive services behind this as well that you can do. Okay, so this is a diagram I put together to try to describe the general pattern for building an app in Microsoft Teams. At the top, you have the user experience. These are the big or small UIs that appear in Teams. And I'll show you some of these live in a minute. In between that and your back-end systems, you have various APIs. Office 365 connectors is a kind of a webhook style way to push data and text right into a team. Microsoft Graph allows your application to query and manipulate all of the Office 365 entities like SharePoint sites and users, mailboxes. The bot framework is a Microsoft technology platform for building bots that is integrated into Teams and, incidentally, also into Slack and Line and a few other apps, which creates some interesting B2C opportunities if, for example, you wanted to have a way to send a message out over Line from within Teams. And then Microsoft Flow is a really nice zero-code or low-code, no-code way of building an application in Teams, and that's also part of our platform. That's all great, but you actually need a back-end service to power Teams. So a lot of times, you can get some off-the-shelf services, thousands of applications and connectors available to power your services. You can get data from Microsoft Forms. That's a back-end system. It captures user input, generates something. You can make an app on that. You can run your app in our cloud, of course, or on premises with a cloud proxy. And you can use Exchange, OneDrive, or SharePoint as back-end systems as well. For example, you can create a web part in SharePoint and use that as the basis for an app in Teams. Just a few examples of what this might look like. So maybe I'll take SharePoint as my back-end system. I'll take Microsoft Flow as my integration layer and create an app that detects every time somebody updates a file and sends a message into a team and gives me a counter, maybe a summary on a tab in a team. Or maybe I want to go to, you can see Trello. Where's Trello is highlighted right here. So I'm going to do a connector to Trello through the Office 365 connector infrastructure and have that send a message anytime somebody updates a task in Trello. Or maybe I'll build my own app, and I'll run it in Azure, and I'll make it a bot, and it's going to send me bot messages about some back-end system and let me talk to that system and share data from that system in a card. So again, just to recap, why build on Teams? Rich platform, it's fast and easy. There's built-in capabilities from Microsoft 365, Office 365. Communications are built in, and it reaches a very large audience for you. Okay, what I'm going to do now is go quickly through our developer platform. Most of you, hopefully all of you, took some time to go through the Get Started materials that we sent out. If you didn't, that's okay. I've gone through them, and my assistants have gone through that as well, and so we can help you as we move on during the day. So just first to reiterate the capabilities in the platform, tabs let you surface rich content within a team or a chat. Messaging extensions let you share a card in a chat. The cards are in a format called adaptive cards, which is a JSON, JSON specification for rendering rich UI. It doesn't really require coding, it's more like formatting. Bots are heavy-duty conversational agents that you can script and connect to AI services and have them do almost anything. We opened up our notifications API, so your app can send a notification to tell the user to go do something, the same way my boss sends me a notification, and I'll probably pay more attention to the app. And then voice and video, we added recently. Your apps can now make calls, can join meetings, can take the audio and video from a call or a meeting and do some interesting things if you wanted to. In terms of publishing, you can upload to your organization's own app catalog. You can put it in our app source catalog to make it available in the Teams App Store. And then as an administrator, an IT admin, you get to decide which apps people have access to. That's a new feature we just added. Most of you have come here with some ideas already. If you haven't, start thinking about a good idea to build an app. Think first about the use case, the scenario. Think about how teamwork can help an existing process in your company. Think how you may have some back-end systems that have simple, maybe APIs like sending an email or a simple web page, and how you can bring that to life inside of Teams. Some examples to look at, like departmental tools or developer tools, employee resources, directory, HR contacts, employee handbook, rules and regulations, policies. Those are great things to put into an app because people always have questions about those. Productivity tools around project management or collaboration. And then approval workflows. Every company has some kind of a process or approval flow, and you can take those and manage those very effectively as an app in Teams. In terms of where your apps can live, they can live in a chat, they can live in a team or a channel, or they can live just for me, just for one user, as a kind of a personal view of that app, which is a nice way to do something that has both a personal context and a group context. And your app can do all three of these, of course. One of the tools that I'll show you a little more later is called App Studio. App Studio is a development environment inside of Teams to help you build and design the scaffolding, the structure of your app. So you can create your manifest, give your app a name, put in all the URLs and everything, and it makes it easy to publish your app as well. Here's some more examples of these interactive adaptive cards, which I like to call micro UI. Instead of having a big, giant, full-screen app, I can have a very focused view of an application, and I can interact with it. So I can click on a button and bring up a drop-down menu or type in some text and send it back to my app without leaving Teams, without leaving the conversation. SharePoint. Maybe you have built some apps on SharePoint, or you have SharePoint apps in your company. Teams takes any SharePoint Foundation application and can bring it into Teams. As a tab, you can also connect web parts in, SharePoint lists as well. And if you build custom SharePoint web parts, you can use some of the existing tools to build those apps inside of Teams. We also have this newer feature called Task Modules, which is a pop-up. Every operating system needs the ability to take the focus of the user to one specific place and ask them to read it and fill it in before submitting it back. And that's what task modules do. So your cards, your tabs, you can do a pop-up window anytime you want. when the user clicks on something. Here's another summary of just kind of a cheat sheet of some of the extensibility points. Bots are for conversations, focused conversations with a service. Message extensions lets you invoke a bot, but to get a data card. A tab is a full screen or almost full screen view in a team or a chat. A connector is a back-end service that pumps information into Teams. An adaptive card is a rich micro UI way of showing apps in Teams. And a task module is a pop-up view that you can put inside of Teams. I want to touch briefly on Microsoft Graph. Microsoft Graph is a set of REST APIs covering pretty much everything in Microsoft 365 and Office 365. And your app can use those to do things like list all the users in the company, list all the teams in Microsoft Teams, create a team in Microsoft Teams, maybe create a site or upload a file or change the permissions on a file. All of that you can do through Graph APIs. So it's kind of the programming layer on top of all of the existing Microsoft application infrastructure that your users are already using. You also have access to some of the Windows 10 Graph APIs and some of the enterprise security and identity APIs as well, all through the Graph interface. The Teams-specific ones focus on teams and channels and users and make it easy for you to create a team, add people to it, delete a team. Here's an example. We have right now probably 10 different airlines around the world using Microsoft Teams in some form, and many of them are using Graph API to create a team for every flight automatically. And they add all the right people, and they add all the right documents, and the channels and the apps. And when the flight lands, they delete the team or they archive it, make it go away. This scenario doesn't have to be limited to airlines. You could create a team every time your company gets a new big customer. You could create a team anytime you open a new store, or anytime a patient is admitted to a hospital, for example. Or maybe create a channel instead of a team. There's lots of ways to tie in this programmability to real-world scenarios. And then here's a cheat sheet on some of the Graph APIs that are available. Some are in V1, some are at beta. For me, I use beta the same as V1, and we push these to V1 pretty quickly. We also recently announced our voice and video apps, interfaces. So now, through Graph API, your app can make a call, you can record a call, you can join a meeting or create a meeting, you can capture audio or send audio. So there's some really neat audio and video features that your apps can do as well. And this is just a build of what some of those features are. Okay, so 2 ways to get your app out there. Put them in our app store, or put them in the tenant's or the company's own private app catalog. If you're doing the second model, then you probably want to use our partner list or your own marketing to make sure people are aware that your app is out there. And that's what the store looks like. Okay, so before I show you some of the tools, I want to run through 50 ideas for apps in case you're looking for an idea today or you want to get some inspiration for something to build. I'm going to start with timesheets. The text is being covered up. Anyway, so why is timesheets important? In Japan and in the European Union, there are new laws that require employers to let their employees track their time. What a great use case for Teams. This doesn't exist right now. There is a market of 500 million people for this type of application. What a great idea to build something like that inside of Teams. And our developers have prepared kind of a guide for how you might actually build that. We've even done some drawings on what it might look like. Here's another one, disaster response. we have an earthquake. You have 50 stores or 50 factories, and you want to reach out to them and have them check in, make sure they're okay. Or you want your employees to check in and make sure they're okay. Perfect use case for Teams. Taiwan has its fair share of natural disasters, whether it's the Meiyue rains or the occasional earthquake or whatever may come. And so having a disaster response mechanism in Teams is a great way to connect with employees. For extra credit, connect this up with Line. So if somebody doesn't answer in Teams, it sends them a Line message and asks them to check in that way to say if they're safe or if they need help. This is all something you can build in Teams. This next one is called Hierarchical Address Book. In Japan, in Korea, in Taiwan, a lot of East Asian countries, companies like to have their address books organized in groups that are nested inside each other. Teams doesn't support that. It's actually, most of my colleagues in the US don't even know this feature exists. What a great add-on to Teams to have this. I have, I think, 5 or 6 companies in Korea that are begging us to find a partner to build this application for them. Same number in Japan. So the data, it's already there in Exchange, in Azure AD. All you need to do is connect it up with Graph and build a UI in Teams. So here's another one. We have a stock quote system in Teams where I can get stock quotes. It's only for the US markets. What about Taiwan markets? What about Asian markets? What about currencies, market indexes? All of us probably own a few stocks. We like to check and share the price. If you work in finance, maybe you want to know what's going on with the stocks of your customers. These data services exist. The URLs are there. You can connect your app straight up to that. Here's another one. A lot of companies have partners, suppliers, distributors, and they want to have what we call an extranet, a way to extend their IT capabilities and collaboration to outside people. But they need a way to manage that. Teams has guest access. You can bring them into a team, but we don't have a comprehensive app for managing that. So this would be a great app to build on Teams as well. Manage the extranet, create it, do an audit on it, maybe archive or retire when the time is up. Production line and IoT. So that screenshot shows a Microsoft Power Apps app inside of Teams, because you can put Power Apps inside Teams, and it is monitoring a production line. And when there's an emergency or a signal from the production line about a problem, it triggers an alert in Teams and starts a chat, or it could, this doesn't exist. It could signal an alert and could start a chat with the right people inside of Teams. It's a really nice way to bring IoT and production capabilities into Teams. Loan Proposal Manager. We have sample code for this. This is ready for you to take and customize and adapt. When a company, a small business, or a person goes in to get a loan from a bank for, I don't know, $1 million Taiwan dollars, they have to go through an approval process that involves a lot of people and a lot of data. You can build a workflow management tool to manage that and make it easy to collaborate inside of Teams. I have a few ideas here for IT admins. Manage guest access. I said that Teams supports guest access. A lot of IT admins, they're a little worried about security, so they don't like guest access. Well, what if we had a nice way in Teams to manage and control that? You could generate reports, you could do an approval, you could revoke it if you didn't like it, all through Graph API, and you could build a bot or some kind of a tab app on top of that in Teams. Another IT one is team creation. At Microsoft, we allow almost everybody to create a team, but a lot of companies, they only allow a few people to do that. and they have IT create teams. Either IT has to do a lot of work, or people don't get a lot of teams. That's not good. There's less collaboration. But you could build a tool inside of Teams to manage that workflow. Now, this is a big one for several customers in Taiwan, and I think at least a few in the room. A lot of companies have been doing on-premises for a long time, and now they're thinking, okay, maybe I'll go to the cloud. Maybe not for files, maybe not for email, but we'll do chat, we'll do Teams in the cloud. Well, Teams comes with SharePoint. And we're trying to add some features to make it easier for you to turn off all of SharePoint in Teams if you need to. I don't know when we'll do that. But that's a pretty big switch. I think a lot of people want to have very specific control over when files are available and who can access them. You can manage that all through Graph API, and you could build the management console for that inside of Teams very easily. This is the example I showed earlier about order exception management in manufacturing, the expertise and knowledge finder in financial services, the patient bed management in healthcare, and the FAQ bot for education. Now, another one to think about is recruiting and hiring. Big companies will have databases and systems for job candidates and open positions. And so you could build some Teams apps on top of that to manage that. And we actually have some sample code available for that as well. Here's another one around invoices and business management. You can manage it, connect this to your back-end finance system and generate reports, or even alert somebody when there's an overdue invoice and they need to go ask them to pay up on the invoice. This is a sample app we've published on time off or vacation time or leave, where employees can request to take time off and their manager approves it. And you can see scaling this up and putting this in the store as a very nice general feature. And if you connect it to timesheets, the first example, then you have this really nice employee time management solution. Here are 20 more ideas. I'm not going to read through every single one of these, but I could maybe point out number 5, which I said we have 10 or more airline customers. We built an airline fleet bot for managing their fleet of airplanes. You can imagine the same capability for machines in a factory. Or number 6, an alarm clock for everybody on the team. So it says at 4 o'clock, we're going out to get a drink and coming back. And so you set that alarm, and then everybody gets the notification. Really nice, easy app to build into Teams. I could also point out number 12, reminding people every 20 minutes or every hour to stretch and get a drink of water. Great feature. Don't have that in Teams right now. We have stocks and weather and YouTube, but they're very America-focused. Would love to have more Taiwan or Asia-focused, like number 15. Or number 17, a currency converter. I'm always doing the math in my head on currency, although I don't pay too much attention to that now. But you can imagine business travelers need a quick and easy way to make sure they know what the current currency conversions are. There's a link down here, Rapid API. That's an API marketplace. You can go there and see hundreds or thousands of different data APIs you can connect into Teams and build an app on. And then Azure has some great cognitive services that you can build into your app as well. Now we got 13 more ideas that came in overnight. Look up the lyrics for a song. Type in the character, the Chinese words for the song, Ni Wen Wen Ai, and then it gives you back the lyrics, and it gives you the video of Teresa Tang singing the song. Or number 3, a Bopomofo bot. My daughter's in 1st grade. She's almost done with Bopomofo, but it would help me if I could actually see what the Bopomofo is for some of the characters that people are sending me. Or a Pinyin bot. Number 5, Taiwan air quality. I have an app on my phone for that. I would love to get an index too, a notification too, telling me the ppm for the different pollution indices. We have a few suggestions from education. And then number 13 is a scavenger hunt, where you put users on a team, you give them some clues, they have to post their responses, it's a private team, and then whoever finishes first gets a prize, and you share the results in a public team. Okay, so those were 50 different app examples. I think you all, each table has a printout of that. If you have any questions about how to build those or how to take parts of those and put those in your app, let me know, because we'll help you do that. Those are all practical, realistic examples of applications you can build. Okay, so let's get to some specific tips to help you during the day, because we're going to start coding in 18 minutes. First, this website. This is your most important website for today, I think. aka.ms/teamsdev. This is where you will find the API references, the getting started guides, sample apps, everything you need, every resource you need to build an app. I go to this website 10 or 20 times a day. It's super useful, and it has everything you're going to need to build an app. The basic steps to building an app. Number 1, you need to get an Office 365 tenant. And you need to configure application side loading in that tenant. So there's the link there. You all have those little cards, the Microsoft 365 free tenant. You can use that tenant to build your app. Or if you have your own already, great, use that. The card is yours to keep. You can have that forever. Well, it's good for a year. And then just make sure you go through and turn on side loading for applications. You need to set up your development environment. For code editing, I use VS Code, Visual Studio Code. You can use Notepad++ or regular Visual Studio, whatever works for you. If you're doing any kind of source code management or building, you want to install Git and GitHub. There's a tool called ngrok, which I'll explain later, but that's an important tool for building apps on your own PC. You can sign up for an Azure trial, so you can put your app up on Azure when you're all done, and even sign up for a trial for the cognitive services, so you can do text analytics and all sorts of things. Then think about the flow for your app. What's the scenario? How's it going to connect together? Number 4, go into App Studio and start framing your app. Number 5, I like to start with the UI. Other people like to start with the back end, doesn't matter. But between 5, 6, and 7, you're building the UI, you're connecting it to the back end, and you're iterating. Remember to start small. Do a hello world with no real data. Make sure that's working, then build it up from there, so you don't have to build something super complicated and then try and debug it. We already saw this slide. Just as a reference again, you have some UI in Teams, you have some APIs or SDK integrations, and you have back-end data or services. A few other success tips. Build on top of the samples. On that website, aka.ms/teamsdev, there are samples. And if you don't want to write any code, go to Flow. And in Flow, you can create really nice integrations and then tune and fine-tune and customize the UI. Start small and then gradually get bigger. Use your local laptop for development. You don't need to put your app in Azure right away and then keep updating it. You can if you want to, but you can develop on your own PC. Or if you're using Flow, you can just develop straight in the cloud. And then to win the prize today, don't forget fit and finish. Think about what the user experience should be. Spend a little bit of time later on fine-tuning the UI, the user interface, and make it look good. A few tools that I want to explain to you, and then these slides we have on we can email to you, or we have a USB stick so you can get access. This is the Teams admin console. You also need to go to the legacy admin console for side loading of apps. That's the step I mentioned earlier. This is Microsoft Forms, which is a great back-end system to connect up to your app if you want to do an employee survey or something like that. This is Microsoft Flow, which lets you build no-code apps and connect those into Teams in a really clever way. You have hundreds of online services that you can connect up, and then you build a rule. You take the input from the output from the service, and you connect it to another service that maybe looks at the data and makes a decision, and then you connect it into Teams where it displays it to the user. This is a really nice, easy way to set something up. This is App Studio inside of Microsoft Teams. It's an important resource for building your application manifest if you're building an app for the store. Developer preview mode. It's a really neat feature in Teams that you can use. You go to your picture in Microsoft Teams. You go down to About, and you click Developer Preview. And then you get access to some of the newer developer features. This is that tool I mentioned called ngrok. If you're building a bot or a message extension, you can use ngrok to host the app on your laptop and use a proxy through the cloud so that Microsoft Teams can access your app. That's all it does. Curl and Postman are tools that let you send messages into the service for debugging. These are good apps to know about. There's an adaptive card designer, which lets you build really nice-looking, visually interactive cards. And you can see here, I can look at the code, I can click and drag and drop to build it, and I can see what the card looks like and take it and put it inside my app. Node.js is one of the programming languages supported for building bots in Teams. It's probably the easiest one, so it's a good one to get started in. Visual Studio Code is a code editor that's available for free if you don't have one. Git and GitHub are source code management tools that you can leverage. Graph Explorer allows you to query the Microsoft Graph API in a browser, so you can test out your graph commands before putting it into your code. The Azure Cognitive Services are ways that you can bring AI into your app. And then the last tool is food and drink. Make sure that you eat enough and drink enough. I don't know if anybody has seen this graph before, the chart, where if you consume more alcohol, your programming ability goes down, and then it goes way up. And so we call that the Ballmer peak, named after Steve Ballmer. So just keep hydrated and don't be too hungry today. Okay, I've got 10 minutes, and so I'm going to quickly show you how to build a few simple apps in Teams, and then we're going to kick off the hackathon live at 10 o'clock sharp. Okay, so the first app that I'm going to build is using Forms and Flow and AI. Let me show you how we're going to do that. So I'm going over to my form, and I'll put this on the big screen for you. Okay, so this is Microsoft Forms. I created an employee survey. I'm asking employees, what did you think about the all-hands meeting? And then if the employee wants, they can respond to that. So I'm going to get the link for that survey. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to pretend that I'm an employee responding to that survey and get ready to type in my response. And maybe I'm not really happy, so I'm going to say I hated it. Wasn't very happy about that meeting. Now, All this does is save the data somewhere in the cloud. There's no app yet. But what we're doing next is we're taking Microsoft Flow, and I'm building a workflow. This is pretty hard to see, isn't it? Let me make it a little bigger. I'm building a workflow. And what my workflow does is it takes this form, and every time somebody submits the form, it goes into each response. It runs it through an AI engine in Azure Cognitive Services to detect sentiment, which means is the person happy or sad or how are they feeling. We also have language detection, entity extraction, a few other capabilities there. And then I have an if-then statement, or a switch case statement. If their score for happy or sad is less than 0.4, they're not very happy. And so I'm going to send one kind of a message. And if their score, and here's what that message looks like. And if their score is okay, then I'm sending a different message. So let's see what happens when I do that. I'm going back to my survey. I'm going to submit it. Survey was submitted. Now I'm going to go to Microsoft Teams. Which I've loaded up here. Give me a second, I'll just put it on the big screen for you. And 9:53 a.m., I got a message saying unhappy employee. I hated it. It went through the AI system and detected that sentiment. And let's just prove that I'm not lying. We'll reload that form, and we'll say, I am so happy, which I hope is on the other end of the spectrum. We go back over here, and I think the message in this case goes into a different channel. Let's take a look. I think it's going into the testing channel instead, and it says, oh, sorry, wrong. I went back to where I was. Hang on, it goes into the test channel, test and testing. And in that channel, it says happy employee, 9:53 a.m., I'm so happy. Okay, so forms, AI, and flow to build a really simple app workflow. All right, now let's do our second app. Second app is going to be a webhook connector and a card. Those are three words that you didn't use before today: webhook, connector, and card. A webhook is a way to get a URL that Microsoft Teams listens to. And anytime somebody posts information, pushes to that URL, Teams grabs it and sticks it into a team as a message. And a card is a pretty way of showing that information. So webhook connector plus a card. So let's see what that's going to look like. First off, I need to configure my connector. So let me figure out where I put Microsoft Teams. I think it's the same. I think I actually put it in the same team. So let's check that out. Go back to the testing channel. And let's see if I've got a connector configured here. And I already set it up, but it's really easy if you want to set your own up as well. So I've got a connector configured, and what does it look like? The most important thing it has, other than the picture, is this URL. This URL, anytime any application out on the internet pushes to it, it shows up as a message inside of my app. So, I'll show you how that works. I have a helper that helps me push messages into apps. It's called Postman. And so here's that same URL that I mentioned earlier, right? And I'm going to send it a really simple message that says, test, 你好. Let me go ahead and send that. And so that's going from my computer out over the internet and pushing on that URL in Teams and sending the message in. Now, okay, that's a simple text message. We could probably do something a little fancier. So I happen to have an adaptive card already written. And so I can show you what that looks like. Instead of this text, 你好, I can replace that with, it's a little more complicated. It's got some buttons and stuff, but it's still easy to build because you can build it using our card editor. So let me go ahead and send this over. Wait for it to send. And look what happened here. I got, okay, I don't know what that's doing. I don't know why my message is so big here. Hang on, that's taking up too much space. Anyway, so what I got here was this message came in, and it's got a picture, it's got big text and little text, it's got buttons. I can actually respond to that app by typing in text and clicking this button down here. Back and forth to my back-end service, just using a simple URL and that little bit of card text to make it happen. Or I can do a date picker, so I can bring up a calendar, or I can do a drop-down menu and all sorts of things. So now what I've done is I've done the webhook connector and the card to make a really nice-looking app inside of Teams. Okay. 2 minutes. Last thing I'm going to do, it's kind of a joke bot, although the joke isn't very funny, and it only knows one joke. But I'm going to show you how to build a bot, or I built a bot that talks to Teams and also works as a messaging extension. So the first thing I'm going to show you is my bot is running on my PC. It's a little hard to tell here, but there's an app up and running on my machine right here, listening to internet calls. Then I also installed and ran ngrok so that I have a URL in the wide internet right here, 9D blah, 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 that anytime some Teams conversation calls a URL, it goes down to my laptop, and the bot runs on my laptop and responds back up. And then the last thing I have is I've actually written the bot code, and it's very simple bot code. All it does is it looks for the message coming in from whoever sent it to me. And by the way, I took a sample and I just customized it. And what it's doing is it's taking this message and seeing if it ends with a question mark. And if it does, oh, that must be a question. And so it answers absolutely to any question that comes in. So let's see how this actually works inside of Teams. So I've got the bot up and running, and I'm going to send a message to it. If I can get my screen rendering. Okay, great. So I'm going to send a message to it, and I'll say something like, is this fun? But I didn't put a question mark at the end of that, and so the bot is not going to respond with absolutely. The bot is going to respond with just the default response, which is maybe. But if I do, is this fun, and do it like that, the bot recognizes the different answer and responds with something different. You can build lots of logic into your bot to answer different questions in different ways. You can use Azure Cognitive Services in the LUIS language model to train your bot to understand what users are asking and respond. One more thing I can do with this bot, I can chat. This is my daughter, I gave her an account here. I can chat with her, and I can use the bot as a quick way to talk to my back-end system. So this is kind of weird. This is kind of crazy. I'm going to mention the bot inside of the chat, And it's going to give me this little pop-up menu where I type in some text, and it's just calling back to my bot with that text. Some text is going to be, testing or something. Now my bot is just going to generate some random text in response. Gives me a drop-down of results based on that query. And I'll choose one of those. And then it's going to put it in a nice, pretty-looking card and send it out. So that's another way that I can connect my bot into a chat. But in this case, the bot is just a way for me to get some information from that back-end system. Okay. That was reasonably interesting. I think you got a little bit of a flavor of how to build some apps inside of Teams. Our assistants are here. So I see Tom in the back, and Jason and a few other folks are here. Tiffany, you'll probably do an intro. So anyway, thank you very much for coming and for listening to this update on the development platform. If you need access to this slide deck, we can email it to you, and we also have it on a USB stick. Okay, Tiffany.
好的，我们非常谢谢 Dan 刚刚精彩的分享，然后带来了非常多的 ideas。